You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. During the second half of the last century, the best indicators of a product's value were the tags recipient of the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval and As Seen in Life magazine. There were plenty of magazines on the stands back in the day, but as a photographer, if you wanted to say you've arrived, nothing said it better than having your pictures published in Life magazine. For almost 4 decades, Life was the weekly go-to publication for general news, lifestyle and entertainment, and of course, photography. At its height, it sold 13.5 million copies a week. Margaret Bourke-White, Eugene Smith, Robert Capa, Gordon Parks, Cartier-Bresson, Dorothea Lange, and Alfred Eisenstadt were among its esteemed roster of photographers. With America's attention switching to television by the late 1950s and eventually away from print media in general, Life slowly became a remnant of another era. But its influence on photography is still immense, and today we're going to be talking about Life magazine and particularly its reincarnation and ultimate switch to Life.com. Joining us is Bill Shapiro, a writer and editor. Bill was the editor of Life magazine from 2004 to 2007 and the founding editor of Life.com. He's also a photo curator and the author of Other People's Love Letters, the children's book Gus and Me, on which he collaborated with none other than Keith Richards. Most recently, he authored What We Keep, for which he asked 150 people about their most treasured objects and included a photograph of each of these objects with an essay. Folks he spoke to for the project included author Cheryl Strayed, comedian Hassan Minhaj, the musician Amanda Palmer, and many others. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here.
We're talking about Life magazine, but in many ways, today's topic is going to really talk about print media in general and how all of that has changed dramatically.
All of this meaning the collapse of advertising in print media?
That's a good starting point. Yeah.
That's an upbeat place to start. I mean, even last week we saw some of the biggest websites, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, Yahoo, have to make staff cuts of their editorial team. So, I think what we're seeing, unfortunately, is the distribution channels, Facebook, et cetera, that's where all the advertiser money is going. And the people who are making the content aren't really walking away with the spoils. The sort of equivalency would be if during the Life era, instead of Life magazine making the money, the U.S. Post Office was making the money, or the delivery trucks who were bringing it to your house were making the money.
That's right. There was a whole support system essentially that made sure it all happened. That's all gone now in a way.
Yeah,
way.
That's gone. But the distribution platforms now are the ones who are making the money as opposed to the content creators.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's jump back a little bit to when you got involved in Life. What had you been doing and how did Life become part of your life?
So I had quite a varied career up until that point, making magazines for lots of different audiences. Parenting magazine, Maxim magazine, Self magazine. I started a business magazine for MBA students that was kind of like the equivalent of, Rolling Stone in a car crash with Fortune.
What's important, though, is that you had the opportunity to do that back then.
Well, that's right. The opportunity to start a new magazine from a blank slate or reinvent a magazine is an unbelievable experience, which I've been fortunate enough to do many times, including with Life. So yeah, and so and I also, for Time Inc., I also ran a division there where we made magazines, custom content magazines for advertisers like Ford, Target, Merrill Lynch, et cetera. So I was used to making magazines for lots of different audiences. Mm-hmm. And when you come to Life and you're talking to the entire population of the United States, right? Black, white, rich, poor, old, young, all sorts of demographics and political persuasions, the ability to speak to all different kinds of people was important.
In a way, Life magazine, if you want to compare it to the medium that took it over, which is TV, would be comparable to, say, the Ed Sullivan Show, which was 1 hour of everything from classic opera to circus acts to the Beatles. And Topo Gigio, a guy standing there with a sock on his hand making a lot of money for years.
Right. Right, and actually one of the things that my understanding is that led to the demise of Life in the 90s, which was before I sort of reinvented it, in 2004, was the fact that advertisers were looking for a more segmented market. So Life was a magazine for everybody, for males and females. So if they wanted to sell, Gillette razors to men, they were buying an audience that cost them, 100%, but they were only reaching 50% because it was only men. So advertisers who wanted to reach the audience that their products were really geared for kind of carried the day against these general interest magazines that were for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you were in Time Inc. and they came to you and said, "Hey, we're going to start up Life again. We want you to be in charge."
They came to me and they said, "Write a memo.
Okay.
What would this magazine look like to you?" And I caught my breath and went home and wrote the best memo of my life.
How much confidence did you have in that? Because again, my guess is you had enough of an understanding of the market, of where it was, where it is, and where it's going. Did you have what was your confidence level on this thing actually working on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, with gangbusters?
On day one?
Day one, yeah.
I would say about a 3.
Okay.
I had never worked on a weekly before.
Right.
I had never done a celebrity magazine before. And I said to Norman Pearlstein, who was the editorial director at Time Inc., the editor-in-chief, who hired me, I said, this is great. I'm thrilled. I couldn't be more excited, but no celebrity experience, no weekly experience. And he said, "You know what you're doing. I have full confidence in you. If we can't find somebody at this company with celebrity experience, shame on us." And we did. And I feel like he was right because I knew what this magazine should be. And so once I had that vote of confidence and I hired the staff, my confidence grew and grew and grew. And in fact, our first issue came out, in my opinion, fully formed, and we sort of heard that from a lot of people, that it really felt like it knew what it was.
And what did you look back on and want to keep, and what did you say, okay, we got to get rid of that, and what did you bring at that point that would have been new to Life? And what was your experience with Life magazine, growing up and up until that point?
So I took pictures in junior high and high school. Not that I was fantastic. I took pictures mostly of the Grateful Dead and would print them up and then sell them at the next show.
Yeah, but back then, nothing else mattered.
Nothing else mattered to
me.
me.
It was okay. That was fine. Okay. That's a good career track. I get it. Okay.
So I did that. Those pictures are worth probably dozens of cents today.
There's a reason why you're sitting here this morning.
That's exactly right. But so I knew what Life magazine was. I read it in high school. I read it in college. Did I have a sense of the history of it? I didn't. Did I have a sense of what it could bring and how it could move people and the power that it had? I did. I had a strong sense of the potential of what a picture could do and how it could make you feel. When it came to this version of Life that I was being asked to reimagine, or asked to produce, the question was, do you bring back the old Life? Do you reinvent it entirely? Something in between. And the answer is, to your question, we kept the DNA, which is the strong focus on photography, visual imagery, using photographs to tell stories. But there were so many things that were different about this magazine, and I can lay them out in a second, that for me necessitated a rethinking of it. So, number one, it came in newspapers. It was an insert like Parade.
That was part of the deal going in, right?
Day one.
Okay.
I mean, that was part of the original business plan. They didn't just want to launch Life.
Right.
They saw a market that was they thought they could take a piece of it, which is those ads that were in the sort of Sunday supplements. They saw a huge circulation, and they saw huge costs for those ads, and they said, we can take a piece of that. We can go premium, which is not print on newsprint, but print on a glossier paper, and bring something else to the advertisers that they might really want.
That's essentially what the New York Times Sunday Magazine section is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something extra. It's a great platform for super glossy, high-end ads.
But this is on a national scale,
National scale with
competing with Parade or other
yeah.
magazines like
So
that,
I think I'll probably get these numbers somewhat wrong, but I think Parade had like 30 million circulation. Monster. I think USA Today had 24, and we launched with about 12 and a half. Still the biggest launch in Time Inc. history. But going back to my original point, so it was coming in your newspaper. It would be surrounded by the day's news, right? Murders, assassinations, car accidents, terrible things that happened on planes. We didn't want to be that, right? We wanted to differentiate ourselves from that. It also came on a Friday. So what are people thinking on a Friday? Thinking about the weekend. So we wanted to be topical that way. We wanted to kind of click into that mindset. We were going to be much smaller, right? At somewhere between 16 and 32 pages. So those were, and maybe most important, we were an uninvited guest in people's homes. In other words, Life magazine on the newsstand, you plunk down your $5, you like what's on the cover, you pick it up. If you don't like what's on the cover, if it was a grisly image from World War II, or it's too sexy, right, you pick it up next week. Not here. So we had to be careful that anything in our magazine would be fine for your 6-year-old daughter to come across, or else we'd be getting letters from readers and from the editors of the newspapers in which we were bundled.
And
with.
was there any continuity with let's say Life from at this point the 60s and the 70s? Were there staff holdovers? Were there decision makers saying, you know what, we used to do it this way, you should continue doing it this way, or not?
That's a great question. So 60s and 70s, I'm not 100% sure. Well, yes. So Bobby Baker Burroughs was a photo editor who had been at Life for years. She was married to a man named Russell Burroughs, whose father was the great legendary Life photographer Larry Burroughs.
Oh, sure.
Who died on assignment in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So his pictures are extraordinary. And Bobby had amazing connections through all of her years through that with photographers like Gordon Parks, David Duncan Douglas, and on and on and on. Bob Sullivan, so Bobby was on my staff. Bob Sullivan had been managing Life Books. He had been on the Life staff when it closed in the 90s or 2000, and had been managing Life Books in the interim. He went on my staff. But I hired some amazing people. I hired the most racially diverse staff at Time Inc. Because, again, we were going out to America, and America was no longer white. So my director of photography is the late, great George Pitts, who had been the first director of photography at Vibe, and in fact had amazing man. And in some ways, he had developed the visual vernacular for rap and hip hop, that we still see today. Richard Baker was the creative director. He came from Premiere and some other places. He had also been at Vibe, and Maggie Murphy from Entertainment Weekly. She was the one who brought that celebrity experience that I was mentioning earlier.
Life in its heyday from the late 30s into the early 70s was this weekly, behemoth, or that's the right word, but this giant in the industry. And then in the 80s and 90s, it became more of a monthly, more or less with the same editorial vision and the same editorial sense.
A little less newsy.
Okay.
Because on a monthly calendar, you can't have the pictures taken in Germany or Vietnam or wherever. and have them, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days later. It's going to be you typically close a monthly magazine, weeks if not a month in advance.
Okay.
Well, even weeklies had its challenge because magazines like Life and Look magazine, they would essentially close at about 3 o'clock on Thursday in order to get all of the artwork and artboards to the printer so that it could be on the newsstands Monday morning. There was about a 4-day lead time back in the 60s, 70s.
Right, and some of that's been improved now because there's printers all over the place and everything is, lickety split. But at that time,
Back in that time, yes.
absolutely. So what you cover changes a little bit, and Life in the later years had to be less newsy.
But I think it was interesting that, again, I remembered Life from its heyday, and even though it was a weekly publication, I would say that it had the same weight as television as far as its content. It was an event. When that thing showed up at your mailbox, first of all, it was big. It was a tabloid. It was giant.
It had authority.
That was it. It had credibility and everything. And when that thing showed up, this is what happened last week. It was a nice summary of what happened last week, and the pictures were premier. Other magazines had photographs, but they supplemented the text. Life magazine was about pictures, and the text complemented the photographs. And I think there was a big difference.
The pictures told the story.
Bingo. Yep, that's it.
So in 2000 is when it ceased its regular monthly publication, and then so there's this 4-year period before you came involved. And
Right.
Was there always a conversation about let's get Life back, let's do something with this, and then
So
they finally came with
during
this idea?
during the fallow years, they published Life books.
Right.
So The Secrets of Jesus, and the Manson family, and that kind of stuff. So there was so Life existed, and they had to do that in part to keep the trademark. Always at Time Inc., it's the Time and Life building. There was a great love of Life. It was Henry Luce's great love, behind Time. And I think they always wanted to bring it back in some way. But for years, I don't think people were sitting around scribbling notes. What can we do? What can we do? What can we do?
It's hard to justify at that point in time, too. I mean, how do you pump up the energy for that? Because there's a reason why it went away. It was no longer
Well,
really
that's right.
irrelevant.
That's right. And so when someone came up with this, what they thought was a way to enter the newspaper market, what they thought was a niche that they could fill and a hole between Parade and USA Weekend, they took advantage of that. It's interesting, we launched with about 12.5 or so million, which was, far and away the biggest launch in Time Inc. history. Life in its heyday got up to that, but it didn't start there.
Right.
So it's a massive launch.
Right.
But at the same time, I would say the penetration was far less than it was with Life in its heyday, because there are so many more people in America now and so many more media outlets. And so before, as you were saying, when Life hit, it was an event. Everybody knew when the new issue of Life hit.
Monday morning, it was in your mailbox. It was there.
Right. And it's like, oh, we're going to come home and we're going to look at this. Less so, even though we were bigger, less impact.
Right. But it's also part of a newspaper which people are getting, and as you said, not necessarily an invited guest into the home. I mean, and some maybe not even looked at. Who knows?
It's a passenger rather than the vehicle now.
That's
In a
exactly
way,
right.
yeah.
That's exactly right. And so our covers had to be such that when you came across them, you'd go, "Oh, that's interesting." So we spent a lot. I mean, we put a lot of even though we weren't on the newsstand, we put a lot of focus on the cover.
But the revenue was still coming from the advertising that was in the magazine. There wasn't a relationship. Did you have to pay the newspapers, or how did that work in the sense that?
If I remember correctly, there was, for some newspapers, there was some payment, but it was not tremendous. Mostly they knew that they were losing younger readers, the newspapers, and they wanted something that was in color, that skewed younger, that was maybe good news to keep younger readers. And so that's what we delivered.
And
Basically, it was a selling point for a lot of these newspapers that needed something, new piece of bait to throw at their readers.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, we saw it as a win-win relationship.
Right. They didn't cost them, and they gained value. In the meantime, you got somebody else delivering your product.
That's right.
Okay.
And so then the focus tended to be a bit more on celebrity and lifestyle and the covers. I mean, the covers that you sent me were all pretty much all celebrity photos. So
Yeah.
And that was
That
the direction.
that wasn't 100% the case. And, there were some stories, conceptual stories. I mean, this is years ago, but we did one about. I think the King Tut exhibit was moving from Egypt to L.A. or something. So we followed the museum directors and how you pack up a priceless mummy and sarcophagus and transport it from X. So there were sort of process stories, the closest we got to photo essays in the traditional sense, things like that.
And that was going to be my next question. Was there an emphasis on the essay in that sense, or did you have to balance something?
So that's an interesting question. I would say that we did lots of photo stories, but that I wouldn't necessarily call an essay.
Right.
Like for me, when I think about a photo essay, it's like, Country Doctor, Eugene Smith's Country Doctor. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end. It goes on for some number of pages. We did photo concept stories like this King Tut. We found out that people were building roller coasters in their backyards. So we sent photographers out all over the country to see these homemade roller coasters in the backyard. We had the idea to go to Times Square and ask people, tourists, anybody walking through, what do you have in your pocket? And they emptied their pockets for us, and we photographed them, and we asked them, why that was. It's not a photo essay.
We'll get to the what do we keep pretty soon, I guess now.
It's not a photo essay, but it was a photo story.
Gotcha.
Now they just call TSA and security clearance at the airport.
Exactly.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
That's a pretty good series, right? And was there an issue, one of the earlier issues that you said to yourself? Well, you said you felt like it was there in the first issue, but was there a time or a particular issue that you felt, okay, now we really got going what we want?
So that first issue, I thought was strong. The photo story in that was we focused on immigrants, refugees, 3 families that were coming into the United States. One from Afghanistan, I think, one from Asia. You're only allowed 1 suitcase when you come, at least at that time, when you come into the country. And so we asked them, took the photographer Christian Whitkin, took photographs of these families with their suitcase opened up, and they talked about why they brought these various things from their countries. And then we had Frank McCourt, who wrote Angela's Ashes, and write an essay about coming to America and the immigrant experience. So it was really lovely. And then, the next issue we did Why I Vote. We had John McCain and Tina Fey on the cover.
Right.
And we went and we asked all these well-known people, like ranging from Madeleine Albright to Andre 3000, why they voted. And so that seemed like a pretty tight photo concept, and people liked it.
It was keeping with the spirit of the original publication, but adding that little celebrity spin to it in a way was that's a comfortable blend.
Yeah, and by juxtaposing people like Madeleine Albright and Andre 3000 from Outkast, we tried to touch a lot of people and
something for everybody there.
and surprise you. Not something for everybody, but also that friction between a hip hop genius and a foreign policy genius.
And what were the photographers, or who were the photographers you were contracting with? Was there a continuation in that sense? And can you mention some names?
Yeah. So we didn't have staff photographers because our staff was, 20, 23, something like that. In the golden age of life, it was 250. So I wish we had staff photographers. I think you lose something very serious without staff photographers. And that's one of the things that, that life had, and those people were always, wherever they were always on the lookout for a life story. So we had folks like Alex Soth, Brigitte Lancôme, Anise and Vanud, the fashion photographers, did our first cover with Sarah Jessica Parker.
That was the Sarah Jessica Parker was the first one? Oh, that's right. And it even says that on the cover.
Yeah, it says we're back. Yeah.
Right.
Funny story about that. I'll tell you later if we get to it. Mark Peterson, Jeff Rydell, Dan Winters, Art Stryber, Joe McNally, Chris Buck, Cass Bird. So, some pretty, they loved working for us.
Yeah. Some big names. A couple we've had on the show too.
Yeah, a couple of former guests. Yes.
Yeah. And of course, it was all per assignment and freelanced out. And were the rates comparable to the other magazines at the time? I mean, I know there's legendary stories of the budgets that, Eugene Smith had back in the day. I'm sure at this point,
those did not exist.
Yeah, exactly. All those changes had been made already. So you were freelancing out to these folks, right?
We talked about those budgets. At the Time Inc. they also had in the old days drink carts on Fridays coming. We didn't have that either. We paid freelancers competitively, but I don't think they were like counting their sacks of gold that they got from Life magazine. But the opportunity to shoot for Life, the brand, number one. If you're a photographer, you've clearly grown up with Life or studied Life, and they love that.
Yeah.
But I think more, they loved working with George Pitts. And they loved the freedom that they had. He would spend a lot of time casting the right photographer and discussing the assignment, but then giving them a large amount of freedom. And that, as the editor-in-chief, was a little crazy making for me because I like my control. Yeah. The shot from Sarah Jessica Parker, the early Polaroids that we got back from our first cover, the first picture I saw had Sarah Jessica Parker with a bag over her head, almost like a suicide shot. And I was like, you must be kidding me. We are not putting this in a family magazine. Sarah Jessica with a plastic bag over her head.
Who was the photographer?
And it's called Life.
And it's called Life. Yeah, exactly. And it's like we're back, and there's and she's smothering herself. Have a great weekend.
One last word.
Yes, exactly. So we didn't go with that shot. The shot we went with, they got it, and it was great.
Right. Do you remember who the photographer was?
That was Anise and Vanud.
Great. Oh, that's funny. And what kind of relationship with the Time Inc. Corporate structure did you have? Were you operating a little bit separately, or all eyes on you guys?
A lot of people, when they think of the Time Inc. brass, rest in peace, was that they were sort of the media overlords. My experience was different. That they hired the best people that they thought that could run this thing, and then they kind of let you do it until they didn't like what you were doing, and then they would find somebody else to do it. So my experience was, not a lot of looking over your shoulder. I remember they did look at the dummy layouts of my first 3 issues, and after that, they were done.
So did you have now you said how much creative control did you have?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
One thing I wanted to clarify from before is, what was your title prior to this?
I was the editor-in-chief of that custom content division,
Gotcha.
which was huge. My staff was 80 plus people plus freelancers, and we were putting out hundreds of magazines a year. So it was a huge division. And then I had been editor-in-chief of that smaller startup business magazine before. This was clearly the biggest, the highest profile thing I had done.
Okay. And you had mentioned in one of our earlier emails that the model for the supplement model was not to your liking necessarily. Can we talk a little bit about that model and whether you felt there was a better way to go about it? And had you been just a straight up magazine, things would have been better?
Well, I don't think they would have launched a straight-up magazine. I think they needed this particular business case to give the go-ahead. What was hard for me was that we didn't have a lot of pages to tell stories. Did I want to tell Eugene Smith stories over 16 pages with photographs, covering a spread? You're damn right I did. But we didn't have the pages, and number two, a lot of a page of advertising in Life magazine when I was there, I think was around $300,000. Huge amount of money. So there were a lot of partial ads. Hard to tell long photo stories when you're kind of wrapping around an ad for, oatmeal.
Right.
So there were built-in challenges.
Right. And who were some of the major advertisers at that point for you guys?
We had a lot of auto. We had packaged goods. I think there was makeup and some beauty, and there were movies.
Tobacco and liquor, though, that was still that was gone. That was history, and that
We didn't.
that was the cash cow for all of these magazines.
And we also we made a decision not to take ads that were so popular in Parade and USA Weekend, like commemorative coins and commemorative dishes.
From the so-and-so mint in Schenectady, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to keep it feeling a little classier and higher, and made the decision accordingly.
And what would you say? What was there anything specific that you felt that you brought to this new publication that diverged from what had come previously? I mean, given the strictures of this type of format, or things that you had wanted to do that you weren't able to do?
I want to tell long stories. I wanted to tell, ideally, more hard-hitting stories. But for the reasons we talked about, you're living in a newspaper, and 5-year-olds could be reading this. We really couldn't do that. I brought creative sensibility to this, and a sense that America was no longer just white. And I think a sense of humor that had been lacking before.
And what, over those 3 years, were the 3 years fair to say? 2007 to...
Yeah, just about 3 years, more or less.
What was the kind of the evolution? What changes did you see as you went along, for good or for bad?
Well, one of the things that we came to pretty early on was that we wanted our back page to be interactive, to be something, like the equivalent of a crossword puzzle for us. And so we called it Picture Puzzle. And what that came to be was sort of a spot the difference between these two photos. So identical photos, but one of them would have 10 differences that were made in Photoshop. Okay. And so you had to sit there over your coffee on Sunday morning or Saturday morning and try to find these things. And some were quite difficult. That was a huge hit. We ended up starting books and calendars based on those, and we sold over 3 million books. So that became a whole different revenue stream.
I remember those, yeah. Too funny.
Yeah, you had a relatively short run. Did you feel that it was ever going to go beyond that, deep inside?
So in the beginning, I thought we had a chance, as did the brass at Time Inc. But pretty early on, we started to get signals that newspapers started firing people. They started cutting sections, and at that point, we got nervous because it sent a really strong signal about print and the viability of the papers and the viability of our partnerships and how much people valued the thing that we were making. So we started to feel that. 2005. That predates Instagram by years, and I don't even think Facebook was like a big thing in 2005. But you still started to get a whiff that it was going to be tough, and advertising budgets were constricting somewhat for print. So, and by the end, I won't say that when we got the "you're done" message, we were surprised. We thought we'd have a little more time. You always do. You think, so.
And had you continued, do you think you could have, pulled it off to the extent that you wanted to a level that you wanted to, where it'd justify itself and nobody would be breathing down your neck? If you had more time, do you think you could have done it?
So with the magazine, honestly, I'm not sure. And part of that was because you're going out to 13 million people every week. Our biggest cost was paper.
Right.
And the more your circulation grows, the more money you're spending.
Right.
Right. And so it's this thing about your success is eating you at the same time. So I'm not sure. And we were clearly in my very humble and unbiased opinion, kicking the butts of our competition. Our stories were better and more engaging and more interesting. We were getting bigger stars on our covers than everybody else, even though our circulation wasn't as big, because they looked better and we had more fun with it. But our paper was much more expensive.
Gotcha.
And did the word of the closing come quickly and like, did they cut your head off right away, or was there kind of lots of conversations, and what was the reaction by yourself and your staff?
So I will never forget this conversation. My editor, John Huey, called me, and he was the head of Time Inc. And he said, sit down, and sat down, and we chatted frequently. So this wasn't, closed the door, and he said, Bill, you're not going to like this. And he said, you guys are done. And he said, do you want me to come down and tell your staff? And I said, no, I got it. And, I remember, I think there was 2 or 3 days before I told the staff, as planned. When you do these things, you come up with a massive, plan so that things don't come out and advertisers aren't caught short. And it's a whole, like the Israeli intelligence is working to make sure this is all, buttoned up and contingencies. But I remember going into that room and telling the staff, and through my tears. Mm-hmm. It was so hard for me. We had all been in this and fought so hard and started this thing together. Had done great stories, and more than anything else, and liked each other and had fun and wanted to keep doing it. But more than anything else, it was life. It was life, and we all felt like, me especially, we let it down. Mm. We felt that weight.
You've got tears in your eyes right now. You are. I tell you
it's from your heart.
I can tell.
It really is.
The way you just put it, I get it. It
was a. I've had a few hard moments in my life, but the other ones were personal.
Gotcha.
And this was really a moment.
And what was the time frame between that meeting that you had with your boss and the final issue coming out and these conversations you had?
Right. Well, that's another thing. So we had this conversation. So I don't know. It was maybe 3 days from when my boss told me, and then I told my top people, and then we had this meeting. Mm-hmm. And then we had to put out one more issue. And that was really hard. But it ended up being, yeah.
Was it a goodbye issue? Did you form it that way, or no?
It wasn't. We had some. I all I remember is we had a story by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, in the issue, and she wrote a beautiful story about a swimming hole, and that felt like a fitting goodbye.
Mm.
Okay. We're going to take a short break, and we come back more about Life, the magazine, and Life.com with Bill Shapiro. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
Okay, we are back with Bill Shapiro. So, Life magazine, as we knew it, comes to an end in 2007, and then 2 years later rises from the ashes as Life.com. What was it like coming back into that office? I imagine in that 2 years, the atmosphere and just the dynamics of Time Life changed dramatically.
So I had continued during that period working at Time. I was called a development editor, and I was helping to develop new magazines to launch, or overseeing sections that were kind of being reimagined in different magazines. So I was still there and being creative, and this idea for Life.com started to sort of percolate, and we developed it in kind of a skunk works, like, could this work? What's this idea?
So there was nothing else like this within Time Life that you were kind of modeling this on. This was the first of its type.
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. the way that it was conceived was really interesting. So there were about 12 million images in the Time Life archive in the library. Extraordinary number of images. All these taken by Life staff photographers going all the way back.
But Life had copyright on all of these. Everything that was shot going back was owned by Life?
So that's a great and not simple question. A lot, the images owned by staff photographers were fully owned by Life, but there were lots of photographers who did not start off on staff, and so there were, we had them in the archive, but did we have full rights? And maybe they then became staff, and then they left, and so there was a lot of figuring out
a lot of gray area there.
Who owned what. But by and large, with some exceptions, we had a ridiculous number of high quality photos to look through, but they were not digitized. So Andy Blau, who was my the president of Life magazine and my business partner, who I relaunched Life magazine with, had the idea of getting with Google to have them digitize all of these photographs, or a huge portion of them. So that got underway. We also we worked out a joint venture with Getty Images for Life.com, because they were interested at that point in having a consumer-facing product. So in the end, we had this really great partnership with Google, with Life, and with Getty to create a website that brought people an amazing number of high-quality images on a daily, hourly basis.
It's like a perfect storm of dynamics.
Very
there.
strong.
Yeah.
Super strong.
And was there an attempt to kind of format this as a magazine or as a weekly, or any kind of issues coming out?
We sort of felt like coming off of shuttering the magazine, and this was even 2 years after that, that we were going digital. Yeah. There was no thought of going print at all.
But not even print, but let's say a digital magazine where you would put something out.
There was no thought of that.
No.
It was going to be an ongoing feed. We thought that by using the Getty images and the Getty feed, we could capture search for various news items. So if it's the Oscars, if it's a celebrity got into a car accident, if there's a sports moment, if there's something going viral with a panda bear, we could be all over it, and toggle between the news cycle and these great photos from the Life archive, which we did a lot. So let's just say there was 10 panda bears escaped from a zoo in China, and Getty had the photos. We would go back to the archive and find other animal escapes through history and tie it together, and so that sort of thing.
And how were you getting people to come to the site then? Was it just word of mouth in general? They knew about it. Subscription? Did you advertise on Facebook?
No, it was organic through the power of the Life and Getty photographs. We launched on March 31st or April 1st, right around the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. In advance of that, knowing when we were going to launch, I had us do a bunch of research into the Life archives and to see if we could find any never-before-seen images from that day. And unbelievably, we found some. And these pictures were taken by a young Life photographer, young at the time, named Henry Grzinski, who made it to the Lorraine Motel hours after the assassination. The pictures that he took, absolutely jaw-droppingly stunning. The brother of the Lorraine Motel owner sweeping up Dr. King's blood from the landing. Pictures of King's colleagues hugging each other in tears. King's suitcase with his shaving cream and Bible in it. Super intimate pictures because the cops hadn't really shut down the scene yet. The pictures never ran in Life because the editor thought, probably correctly, that they would inflame them. So they didn't run. And we were able to, 50 years later, bring them back And to your point, we launched with those pictures. They were everywhere: CNN, ABC, NBC, and Life.com was born.
Mm-hmm. And so then the project in general was a combination of like, as you said, looking back at what you had and kind of an archive dig and trying to just go back and rediscover what you have in combination with whatever Getty was supplying you. And is that fair to say?
Yeah, and coming up with story ideas and toggling back and forth between and contextualizing what was happening now with what was happening then.
But the editorial decisions were made by you or
100%.
at Life.com. It wasn't Getty
team
saying, "Hey, we want this."
Zero.
Okay. All right.
It was we were myself and my team. We were very much 100% in charge of that.
When you came into new assignments for Life.com, was the approach different from the magazine as far as the scope? Obviously, you couldn't use as many pictures. Or am I wrong about that?
So the great thing about, and what was so exciting about working at Life.com as opposed to the magazine, is we could tell stories that could go on as long as the story needed to be told. We didn't have to stop at 6 images because we only had 6 pages. And we could even break a great set of pictures into 2 stories if it made sense to do that. So we didn't assign tons and tons of stories because we had such an unbelievable wealth of assets, at our fingertips, really. But we did assign some stories, some terrific stories, where we had a photographer inside the Westboro Church. Those are some pretty scary folks. Mm-hmm. He also, for a different story, went inside the KKK kind of family picnic. And so we did some stuff, and we let those run pretty, as long as the pictures were strong, we let it go. And
there was budget for that in general? Or
we figured it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it became worth it.
And what was the ad revenue, or how did you guys plan to make money off of this?
Right. So it was based on traffic. We sold ads against traffic, and our site was really well designed. It was the opposite of BuzzFeed in many ways. It was kind of a luxury experience. The background was black. The photos were super clean. There wasn't boxes of ads all over the place. Right. So Rolex advertised, some autos advertised. HBO advertised. So we had some really Disney advertised. We had some very strong top shelf advertisers.
And was there an issue getting these ad dollars coming in? Did that ever what was the ultimate reasons why this was shuttered?
Well, first early on, getting ad dollars for online stuff was impossible because everybody just looked at it as giving things away for free.
Yeah. So there was
a wall.
There was some of that. So we did pretty well with that, with advertising. And I think at the end of our second year, we were just about at break even. We in our first full year, we did over 1 billion page views. It was super, super strong. We won the National Magazine Award for Best Digital Photography. We won a couple of Webby Awards for Best Design Website and, Best Homepage. So we were doing great in many respects, and we had the highest engagement in the Time Inc. building, people staying on site. Because people like pictures, and they'll look through an endless number of pictures if the stories are told well. The advertising was somewhat challenging, like money wasn't, being dumped on us. But we were doing okay. But the reason why Life.com eventually became something else wasn't really to do with the advertising.
So you were getting recognition. You were about to start going into the black. What caused them to just say, "All right, we're pulling the plug. We don't want to pursue it"? I mean, you were about to make it. It seemed like you were growing and happening.
My feeling is we were in a really good place. A couple of interesting things happened. It's really a case of corporate cannibalism. Our traffic was terrific. Time.com, which was in the same corporate group as we were and sort of oversaw us, needed more traffic. And it was more important for the company, for Time.com to be successful because more money was on the line. They were bigger than we were. Essentially, they swallowed us. They said, we need your traffic. And so we became a vertical, a section under time.com. And
so your success was responsible for your demise in a sense.
That is exactly right. I mean, somebody said to me when we won the Digital Photography National Magazine Award, somebody pulled me aside and said, you win, you lose.
Oof. And did you get what was being told to you at that moment or no?
No, I didn't. But I remembered those words because
obviously.
So at that point, when it went under Time, I left. My deputy, Ben Cosgrove, moved over along with one other staffer, moved over to run Life.com. But at that point, they got rid of all the Getty news pictures and just made it archival. And Ben did a great job. Personally, I never wanted to have it be an archival project where it was only looking through dusty old pictures. Like, to me, you had to have new pictures of the day and people.
That's my field too.
People
That's why
that
I asked
things
you
we're
earlier.
talking about and stuff that was in the zeitgeist to make it feel relevant.
Yeah.
So at that point, then, other than the two people you mentioned, they kind of cleared the staff out. And that was it.
And then since then, it's even. I'm not even sure it exists anymore.
Right. So do you see any remnants of it in what they're doing now, either at Time or
no?
at Life.com?
I mean, I think that I think there are some archival pages up at Time.com which you can find, but it's not a currently curated, well-staffed, well-thought-out experience. I mean, I think they're still doing some picture stories, but it's not the same. I mean, it's a completely different experience.
Right. And fair to say that was the final chapter, or at least for now, of Life magazine?
Yeah, I mean, it's my, I think the brand has so much equity. I mean, I want to circle back to that in a second, but has so much equity and so much power that I promise you it will come back at some point. I guarantee it. But at the same time, and I meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about launching the magazine. One of the issues with launching with a name like Life is that everybody knows it, everybody knows its power, but everybody also thinks they know what it is. I can't tell you how many times we would come to a young ad buyer. These are the people who kind of hold the keys to the kingdom, and you don't get to see their boss until you kind of cross. And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Life. My dad read that."
Right.
Challenge.
Total.
Yeah. Branding is a tough one to redo sometimes.
So I do think Life will be back. If I had a crystal ball, I'd say yes, but I don't quite know in what form.
Well, it's kind of interesting because if you do a little Wikipedia search on Life, you find that in the 30s when Luce bought it, I mean, it had already existed for 50 some odd years as a magazine in a different format.
Right. Not a photographic magazine.
No, absolutely not. And he bought it just for the name itself.
Right.
And sold the subscriptions and everything else to other people and started a whole new format magazine.
Now, in some ways, the woman who would become Luce's wife, Claire Booth Brokaw at that time, was a young editor at Vanity Fair. She pitched the idea of a photo magazine to Condé Nast. They didn't take it, and eventually she married Luce, and not long after that, Life.
Interesting. Oh, I didn't know that part of it. That's interesting. And I have a question about maybe the environment for magazines today, because we are seeing new photo magazines launch, even in print. There's this California Sunday magazine.
Yeah, they're doing great work.
They're doing great work, exactly. And of course, there are many online photo magazines that are, kind of returning to this idea of the photo essay. And
a lot of very heavy paper, glossy publications, sort of like, rather than going for newsprint, they're going for more expensive stuff.
Well, so I believe that Time Inc. made a huge mistake by closing Life.com because they ceded a tremendous amount of authority and traffic around the currency of photos to Instagram and some of the others, and Facebook and whatnot. And I think that they missed a real opportunity, and they didn't sort of look at it. At that time, you could see Instagram taking off. You could see what was being shared on Facebook mostly, pictures, right? So the currency of communication now is almost entirely photographs. The things you text to each other, the things that go viral, they're pictures. And the need for a place where you can see the best pictures of the day and the best photo stories of the day and the photos that will move you and make you feel something in some way, I think that exists.
But online certainly, but in print form, what would be necessary to get people to go to the magazine and open it up and look for their best photos in a print form?
I think the way magazines going, mostly they're super niche.
Yeah.
So if you're a horse person and you want to see the best photos of horses, that might work.
Right.
But I have some trouble believing, and not just about, this has nothing to do with photography, any sort of broad interest magazine, I think it's just too hard right now. I wish that wasn't the case because I'm, kind of a magazine lover. Mm-hmm. But with the exception of the New Yorker, it's tough.
It's getting hard. It really is getting hard to justify going to a newsstand and buying a magazine. And again, I earned my living for a million years photographing for magazines. Hurts me to say that, but that's the fact. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, for example, this California Sunday magazine, something keep your eye on.
Yeah, they're doing great work.
Yeah,
they really are.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your other work, because you got a lot of other stuff going on during that time and since. You've published a few books, and we have in front of us What We Keep, which is the most recent. And as you mentioned, I guess it does share a little DNA with some of the projects you were doing at Life magazine, particularly the one about Times Square, what's in your pocket, and things like that. So can you explain the book a little bit?
Well, yeah, I have this feeling in my body that objects tell stories. And so my co-author, Naomi Wax, and I spent 3 years going around the country and talking to people about the single object in their life that has the most emotional resonance, and getting the stories behind those. So we spoke with people like Melinda Gates and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Cheryl Strayed and Joss Whedon and also quote unquote regular people. Right. And the stories are just really, really moving. And in the book there's a photo of the object, and then the story that goes along with it.
Any common threads you pick up along the way?
Well, one of the things we found is that no one chose an object of monetary value. It's like our hearts are not accountants. We go for the meaningful, not the monetary. So that was a little surprising to us.
And did anybody just come with the picture and say, this photo of something is my most treasured item? Or did you rule photos off the table?
Oh, that's a good question.
So there was an artist named Radcliffe Bailey, who's an African-American, pretty celebrated artist, who's terrific. His object are a series of tintypes of his family from the 1890s, which his grandmother gave to him when he was just out of art school. And he was sort of, as he describes it in his story, looking for direction, and looked at these pictures and started to find his direction. So these were meaningful not only because his grandmother gave them to him before he passed away. They're beautiful pictures because they're his relatives, but because it was also sort of a fork in the road, and these pictures gave him the steer that he needed to kind of reach the heights that he did.
It's funny that you mentioned people having objects that have meaning in their life. I can't help but thinking back to Jay Maisel being here, where he had a building full of things that he's found, and every single one was a story to him and a project to him. But literally, he had 55 rooms full of things that had meaning.
Yeah, we tried to narrow it down a little bit.
And did you hear of somebody's item and said, "Oh, we got to find that story, or we got to get this person in the book," or was it? I mean, how did you find the people that you ultimately included?
So, great question. There were some people that we just thought were so interesting that we wanted to include. Like I approached the great photographer Neil Leifer because he's seen so many things over the years, and he had assigned Muhammad Ali boxing glove. And, one of the reasons Neil got to where he was is because he photographed and had such a great relationship with the champ. But a lot of people we just interviewed, and we thought about who would have a unique relationship to an object. Okay, would somebody who's doing a long stint in prison, would a cloistered nun, would a counterfeiter who makes fake things,
Right.
Would a Buddhist who's not supposed to be attached to anything. So we went after people like that, and sure enough, they had some pretty interesting stories to tell.
Okay, great. And while we're here, let's just throw out the other two books. How many books have you done? Let's put it that way.
I think I've done about 4.
And have all of this has come since Life.com closed its doors and you walked away, or some of them were in
The
works
first
before?
book was in 2007, so that was around the time that Life magazine was closing.
Gotcha.
And then the Keith Richards book, I think, was 2014.
What I think is so cool is that you went from an online product to doing books. I love it, actually.
For me, it's all about the idea, and I'll find whatever medium is best to tell that story. At life.com, we decided to do an app for the tablet, which was kind of all the rage. And it was a great medium for that because you could bring in sound and move, and film interviews that had been done with some of the great photographers over the years. And you could have a map and you could say, oh, I want to see pictures of Belarus, or I want to see pictures of Alabama, and go there. And, that app ended up being number 1 in 33 countries. And so it's really about what's the idea and can you marry it to the right medium? So in some ways I'm kind of, medium agnostic, just what's the best marriage for the idea.
Gotcha.
What We Keep would be a good podcast. What do you think?
I'm in talks.
Really? All right, then. Well, we look forward to that. Great. And so that's the next project then? What We Keep podcast? Or what are you doing next?
Yeah, I'm actually working on I'm developing a couple of photo-based ideas. Some for clients, one fine art, and one more of a personal thing, and also thinking about the next kind of iteration of What We Keep and extending that because people really like it and find something for them in it. So thinking about the next iteration, a sort of exploration of that idea.
We did recently a What is Photography portrait series, another one of our colleagues here, and we asked a lot of the photographers who we photographed if they could bring in something that speaks to photography for them.
Nice.
And it was a nice idea. A lot of them didn't bring anything. It wasn't a requirement, needless to say, because we didn't
3 of them brought this book in, which was interesting.
Only 3.
We didn't want to scare anyone away, but some people did bring some things, and it was pretty great. I mean, the first camera they ever had, or whatever it happens to be. So
well, what happens, one of the things, maybe to answer your question before, what we found was that when people start talking about objects that are meaningful to them, they don't realize they're talking about themselves.
Yeah.
And that's when the door opens.
This has been as usual, another fun episode. And Bill, it's been great talking with you. If people want to get a hold of What We Keep, your latest book, where can they get copies of it?
Wherever fine books are sold.
There you go.
So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and our site is whatwekeep.org.
Okay.
And Running Press is the publisher. Okay.
That's right. And it's a wonderful book, by the way. It's a lot of fun to go through, and it's interesting to see what strikes a chord with people. And I think we all have a common thread for that whole thing.
It was really fun to put together.
Okay, before we go into sign-off mode, a reminder, if you're going to be in town on February 5th and 6th, join us for Depth of Field, a free 2-day wedding and portrait event smack dab right here in the middle of heart of New York City. We are going to be there. We're going to be doing interviews right there on location. If you're there, stop by and say hi. Among the speakers, Albert Watson is going to be delivering the keynote speech, which alone is worth the price of admission. If you are not a subscriber to the B&H Photography Podcast, what you're waiting for? It is informative, it is entertaining, and it's the only photography podcast that's visible in the infrared portion of the light spectrum without need of expensive filters. iTunes. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, and Spotify. And you can always find us on the B&H Explorer website, and coming soon, the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. For now, on behalf of Jason, John, and myself, thank you so much for tuning in today.